Hello and welcome to The Hero Spouse. I'm Kendra Ruth, here to answer one of your questions about marriage and midlife crisis. Today we have a male left behind and forward-moving spouse with a bomb drop of August 16th, 2023. I don't know the date of marriage because he put 2023, so clearly there's a typo somewhere in there. And he's not familiar with contact type or energy level, but his MLC is an at-home MLC, so contact type is at home. And energy level, she clearly at this point appears to be a low energy wallower. He says, my wife and I began having problems at the end of 2022. She's from Europe. I think her father having a heart attack in 2022 is what started this down the path, as I noticed a big change in her after that. She always said, I don't have feelings. When you say always, do you mean always as in before that then, since you're saying always? Or do you mean always as in since that heart attack period? Okay. She went home over the summer with our kids. So 2023, she went home over the summer with the kids. While there, she told me she wanted a divorce 3 days before I arrived. I still went and met them. Since then, we are living like roommates. It's good you went and met them. That's good. We co-parent well, but no affection or intimacy, and she doesn't want to work on the marriage. We're still living together. Do you have any advice on how I can prevent this from progressing and becoming worse and come back to a healthy, good marriage again? So, a few things. First thing, if we're looking at this as the context of a midlife crisis, there's a yes and a no to your question. First, MLC gets worse before it gets better. What I can't do, and what I wouldn't do anyway, is prevent the midlife crisis. When somebody's already there, once that's an inevitable kind of thing, like your cookies are already in the oven, it's like, I can't prevent you from making cookies. We've already rung that bell sort of thing. It's kind of like saying I can't prevent someone from having an affair once they've already done it. And so once she's already started a midlife crisis, she has started a midlife crisis, if that's what this is. So midlife crisis gets better before it gets worse before it gets better. That is axiomatic. So when you say prevent this from progressing worse, I'm not going to prevent the midlife crisis, and neither are you. But let's talk about preventing the marriage from getting worse, okay? So there are parts of it, it's not going to necessarily improve or get better during midlife crisis. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to preserve. Now, when we preserve something, we don't make it better. We just maintain, we sustain, we keep it as it is. So that means that it's not improving, okay? So what you do is you put your marriage in a box and you put it on a shelf, because the priority for her right now is not the marriage. And if you insist on making it the priority, that is going to contribute to making things worse. Even with the kids. You can do all of the guilt trips of the kids, but we need you. That's going to make it worse. That is pressure. And all of the duty bound, but you made a vow, all of that. Sure, those things might be true, but they're pressure. Why do these things matter to you? That's pressure. And we don't always have an answer to our whys. Some things are, it just does. I can't verbalize why. So when I talk about this, I want you to have some empathy for her fear with her dad. The fear of watching her dad, watching him become weaker and weaker, watching him as he may die, then experiencing her dad's death, which, if it hasn't happened, may be coming up, and coming to terms with what that means, not just for her life, but for life, and how she's processing that and what that means to her, what it means for her life. And she looks at his life and goes, this is what am I doing with mine? Maybe he did more with his. Maybe he did less with his. Maybe she's saying, I'm following the same path and I don't want to. All of these things, you come face to face. When you come face to face with death, even though it's someone else's death, you start to ask yourself those existential questions. And she's going to be asking them. And you're not going to be able to stop her from doing that. And if you were to stop her from doing that, What that does is if you yank them out of the front of the MLC tunnel, what happens is they go back in later for a much worse crisis. And you think you've gotten a reprieve because they go back in like 10 years later. And you think everything is fine. 10 years later, bigger bomb drop and things explode. And you don't want that. You want to handle it now. You want her to reintegrate those parts of her that are scaring her, that you want her to figure these things out. You want her to grow and develop and get to answer these questions. You want her to become her authentic self and feel at home in her skin so that she can also feel that she is at home with you and the children and that she is appreciated and blessed and respected and wanted and loved. And she said she doesn't have feelings. Does she know what feelings are? There's emotions and feelings, and they're not the same thing. Feelings are the somatic interpretation of the emotions, how we feel the emotion in our body. So oftentimes, anger will be felt as a clenched stomach. Anger might be felt as tightening muscles. You often ball your fists up when you have anger. So she might not know how these things feel in her body. The sensation of emotion. She may be closed to those. Given that it was her father and she went home, it made me think of a lady from church we all went through in adult Sunday school talking about some of our stories. And she talked about what led her to her divorce. Everyone's story was pretty marriage, divorce, saving marriage, divorce-based stories because we were talking about our challenges. And hers was, this was 30 years ago or more, maybe 40, when her father died. She said she was standing there, and I think next to her husband, at the funeral, and she just felt completely lost and vacant. What am I doing here with my life? It was the bottom fell out of her. And imagine the feeling of the bottom falling out of you is, imagine the feeling of your stomach falling whoosh down. And there can be this internal feeling of it. And you're standing there at the graveside. I think she described it at the graveside, with her husband there next to her, probably holding her hand, her children there next to her, and the tears. And her mom was probably there, and she and her dad had been very close, and he died suddenly and too young, in his 50s, I think, if it wasn't early 60s. And just not knowing what to do now, not knowing and not wanting to go on with her life that she didn't feel was living up to what she needed it to be. And is your wife asking those same questions? And if she is, how can you be empathetic to that rather than, I don't know what her husband was, but oftentimes we don't recognize what the other person is going through. They don't tell us what they're going through. And we try to hide it. Well, that person's going to criticize me for it. But if we can be empathetic to it, even if they're not going to verbalize it and tell us, even if we can simply be empathetic, understanding to, I can see that this is really hard for you. And I know that you may not have words. And if you do have words, maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to me about it. And that's okay. Now, what we've done with that right there is helped them to become comfortable. We want them to become comfortable, and we don't want to be offended when they aren't. These are things that are hard. She's going through some challenges. How you prevent this from getting worse in the marriage sense of it, because it's hard. And she's going to be depressed. You prevent it by not taking it personally. You prevent it by recognizing that you have a spouse who is probably very depressed, probably questioning her life, doubting her life. And you don't want to take that as an insult to you. If you do that, that is going to contribute to making it worse, because that means you're going to be taking it personally. And it doesn't have to be personal. These are the things that we go through and we question ourselves. It's natural to question our choices in life and sometimes wonder, what if I had done this instead of that? What if I hadn't married this person? Even though I'm happy married to this person, what if I hadn't? Sometimes people even leave marriages where they're like, well, it's not bad, but is there something else? That doesn't make it right or wrong right now. We need to be understanding of it, because if we're understanding of it, maybe we can help come through it to reconcile together rather than split. When these things lead to separations and going our separate ways toward divorce is when there isn't understanding, which then leads to taking it personally, to animosity, to conflict, to anger, to blame, to projection. If you can prevent yourself, so preventing, I want to put that prevent back onto you, from taking it personally. And that might mean you have to step up and be more of a caregiver to your kids. It might mean you step up to be a caregiver to her. It might mean you get therapy for the children. If mom really is depressed and not just kind of in a melancholy, the children might need a different level of care, because depressed moms or dads, but especially moms, can really have a negative effect on children, because they don't know what to expect from mom at one point or another in care, because they can be neglectful even when they love their children. So where do you need to step up? The main thing in this is grace and understanding that you might not understand. You might not get it in an experiential way. But if you can still have empathy for her, the compassion for that I don't know what you're going through, but I can be here with you in that I care. That can make a difference. I can't make a promise, but it can make a difference. Okay? I'm sorry that you're going through this. I'm sorry that she's going through this. I'm sorry that your children are going through this. But with one strong and stable person, you can get through this and you can get your children. Okay? So that means you work on your healing. You work on your detachment so you can be emotionally regulated, so that you can have the compassion and the grace to her. Okay. I hope this is helpful, and I will see everybody in the next question.